buildings along Quailwood. There is a small cul-de-sac proposed, and the pickleball courts would stay out front towards the highway. They do create there is a distinct noise when you're playing pickleball, so that was thought to be placed out front. And that gets us to where our concept is today. And we feel like this is a similar use and similar extension of Quailwood and Jamestown. I think the density is about 20% less on the townhomes here than are existing in Quailwood right now. I think they have 72 or 78 or so townhomes in Quailwood, and we're proposing 58 here. So yeah, that's where I am with it. I'd like to kick it over to Stace, and she can go over, Steve, and go over some of the zoning and engineering involved.
Yes, and just a couple of things to emphasize before I turn it over to Stacy, and not to belabor the point, but when Mark talks about the evolution of the concept plan, of course, the concept plan is what we're envisioning with respect to the use of this property under the NCX zone. Obviously, if the property is annexed, the project will have to go through the design process with the Planning Commission and the town. But this is what we believe is a good, highest and best use of this property. It's interesting that we went through these concepts in working with the town and with the surrounding communities, and we actually ended up right back with a land use that's similar to the adjoining neighborhoods, which I guess makes sense when you think of it. It's an extension really of the single families and the townhouses that exist in the adjoining neighborhoods. The other thing, excuse me, with respect to land use, I think the so-called 5-year rule was mentioned a little earlier tonight. What state law says is that if the new zoning in the town in which the property is annexed allows a significantly higher density than the zoning under county zoning as it exists at the time of annexation, that the owner has to either get the express permission of the county to implement the land use or has to wait 5 years to implement the land use. We know and acknowledge that that rule will exist and will apply to this particular annexation. We understand that the net result of this, if this property is annexed and zoned NCX, is that it will allow a much higher density than in the county under the CC and the RR zone. Now, I will say this, the CC zone, the commercial zone that applies to this property is very, very permissive. The property could be developed in the county as a rather intense commercial project. However, we also know and acknowledge that developing on an intense commercial project on well and septic makes absolutely no environmental sense. So part of the annexation is intended to connect this property to town water and sewer facilities. And with that, I would like for Stacy to talk about comprehensive land use plans.
Good evening. Just next slide, please. So I just thought I would review very quickly the overview of the annexation requirements. Just a brief overview within the town of La Plata. When you submit for a petition for annexation in compliance with the Annotated Code of Maryland, you have to provide several items. A property description and description of the proposed uses. The property must be contiguous to the town and not create an enclave. You need to identify the requested zoning district classification, provide a fiscal analysis, an analysis of the surrounding area, show existing and proposed public facilities and improvements, show your consistency with a comprehensive plan, and also submit a draft annexation plan. We've complied with all of that, and now we're here today for our public hearing. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the proposed annexation area. As you can see, the Annex 8 area is composed of 6 parcels totaling about 53.2274 acres. The existing town boundary is depicted here in green. So as you can see, it's adjacent to the existing town boundary to the south and the east. Next slide, please. This slide just basically shows you the existing conditions of the site as it stands today. The site is approximately 0.6 of a mile east of the intersection, west of the intersection of Route 301 and Hawthorne Road. It's primarily wooded with a small area of clearing at the intersection of Hawthorne Road and Quailwood Parkway and in the vicinity of the existing ball fields. So next slide, please. We already briefly touched on this. The existing zoning, of course, is RR. The RR zoned property is about 20.53 acres. In the county, the zone would allow for single-family homes, possibly some Class A manufactured homes, maybe a golf and country club. The CC zoned portion of the property is about 32.7 acres. There's a variety of uses, as Mark touched on, that could be permitted here. And it's also allowed to have up to 85% impervious surface coverage. So next slide, please. So that brings us to the requested zoning, which is the neighborhood commercial mixed use zone. We're requesting that the entire annexed area be zoned NCX. So next slide, please. So within the town zoning code, it specifies some criteria that need to be met in the NCX zone. So for this requested zoning designation, we listed some of those here. It's intended for areas that are either currently developed or proposed for development. And in this case, this property, of course, is currently proposed for development, so we meet that line item. May be used only for land that is in a targeted municipal growth area under the growth element of the comprehensive plan and is either underutilized, transitional, or vacant. This site is, of course, within the targeted municipal growth area. It is underutilized, transitional, and vacant. So also, the property must be intended for land, the NCX zone is intended for land that is convenient both to commercial zones and residential zones to provide essential services to existing neighborhoods. This property is convenient to both residential and commercial zones. It allows for a range of densities and a mix of compatible uses. Of course, this project is providing a mixture of dwelling types as well as a commercial element. Development in the NCX zone should include commercial and residential uses or provide a transition to residential areas. After numerous iterations that Mark went through, the current concept shows single family abutting the adjacent existing single family homes. We'll also have a 20-foot buffer yard type E with a 7-foot fence surrounding those areas to further buffer the adjoining residential homes. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the future land use plan from the town's comp plan. And it shows that the area in purple is Hawthorne Yards, as shown, within the southwest quadrant municipal growth area is where Hawthorne Yards is placed. And it's envisioned to be a medium density residential and mixed use subdivision per the, or mixed use per the comprehensive plan of the town of La Plata. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to review some elements of the comprehensive plan and how this project is consistent with the current comp plan. The comp plan is broken into several different elements with various purposes and goals. So I've outlined some of those here. So I'll briefly touch on some of those. There's a land use element which indicates that new development will reflect the principles of walkability, sustainability, and environmental protection. This project is going to provide sidewalks, trails. It will be sustainable. We will also be compliant with all environmental codes and ordinances. The municipal growth element requires that new growth areas be connected to water and sewer service. This project, if annexed, will be connected to public water and sewer. Also support annexations when there has been a clear path and identified funding for water and sewer connections. In this case, the developer would be responsible for the infrastructure costs associated with this project. Closely coordinate annexations with county government. The county government is aware of this project and what is happening with this job. And by the environmental element is specifies to protect sensitive areas and require a high standard of environmental protection. Again, all codes and ordinances with regards to environmental protection will be implemented. The water resources element says that we should preserve and enhance high quality and sensitive water resources impacted by growth and development. And this project fully intends to comply with that element. The transportation element calls for a walkable community, better manage the supply of existing and limit new off-street parking. Again, we're providing sidewalks to encourage that walkable community and trails. And we are also actually along an existing Van Gogh bus route. As far as the community development element, that encourages a range of housing, density, type, cost, and support aging in place initiatives. This project is providing a range of housing, density, and type of housing. As far as the recreation and parks element, they call for you to create strategically located community parks and neighborhoods and provide open space. As said earlier, this project is providing pickleball courts, a neighborhood park that includes a playground, pavilion, grills, and benches. There's also walking trails that we provided throughout the community. So, next slide. So this slide just shows the Van Gogh bus route, just to show you that the buses do go along Hawthorne Road, and they do stop just east of the project at Hawthorne Road and Magnolia Drive. So next slide, please. Just to review briefly, there will be an extensive review of the project at a greater level of detail should the annexation be approved. The project, should it be annexed, would be subject to a step 1 and 2 and 3 stormwater review, environmental reviews, APF reviews, which include more detailed reviews of water, sewer, schools, traffic. It'll be subject to a sediment and erosion control review. The preliminary plan will have to be submitted and approved by the Planning Commission as well as the record plats. So this project would have quite a few steps ahead of it should it be annexed for thorough reviews of all elements of the project. So next slide, please. So I just want to touch briefly on utilities. I'll touch base on the water and then I'll pass it over to Rob with McCrone to discuss the sewer study that was performed. As far as water, there's adequate facilities in the surrounding area. We actually have a recorded easement that grants access to the water line within the Jamestown subdivision. There's also a water line that runs down Hawthorne Road. So there is adequate water service in the area that we can tie into. The developer does understand the current allocation concerns and the town's efforts to obtain additional water allocation, and that must be addressed for this project to move forward. We're aware of that and know that is a concern. So, and with that, I will turn it over to Rob to discuss the sewer study. Are you there, Rob?
I sure am. Okay. The flow from the new development will go to an existing pump station, the Quailwood Pump Station. So as part of the evaluation, we investigated the condition of the Quailwood Pump Station. And the pump station over the years has been upgraded kind of uniquely. It has 2 different pumps in it. One of them is bigger than the other. So we, to be conservative, we evaluated the capacity in the pump station based on the smaller of the 2 pumps. So right now, the way the pump station is operating and the amount of and the space inside the pump station, there could be some adjustment to controls, and we could put the first, I think it's 112 homes could be served by this pump station. Once it goes above that, the pump station would have to be upgraded. The electrical system may have to be upgraded. The generator would likely have to be upgraded. All that's in the Quailwood region. So it is. So there is some capacity in it, but not for the entire development. So I think that covers that.
Musical microphones. So just a couple of more follow-up on what Stacy just indicated and also what Rob indicated. On the sewer upgrades, and that is the upgrade of the Quellwood pump station. Obviously, the developer who is, if this project proceeds, would be creating the impact on the public sewer system, would be improving and upgrading that pump station at the developer's expense. So that's part of the annexation agreement that would be signed between the town and the developer if the annexation proceeds. There is some amount of additional capacity that'll be created, but certainly not enough to accommodate the hub annexation if the hub comes in as well. But there will be some capacity created over and above the Hawthorne project as indicated in the sewer study that was submitted. With respect to comprehensive land use plans, just kind of backtracking to what Stacy said, excuse me, I just want to emphasize that this project or this proposal, this annexation proposal, is also consistent with the county's comprehensive land use plan. And I think that was indicated in the meeting with the county by the county staff and also in the county's letter. And that is the county's comprehensive land use plan calls for a development district in Waldorf, but also for the incorporated towns to be development districts. So the town of La Plata and the town of Indian Head. And the idea of designating development districts is to channel the development within our county to the areas in the development districts where public infrastructure can be provided to service the new development. And public infrastructure, of course, is primarily the water and sewer facility that would be created and provided as part of this annexation. As was testified last week in the meeting with the county, obviously the development of property on public water and sewer is far superior environmentally to the development of residential and commercial properties on well and septic. So that's the idea. And we should also mention that that is consistent with the state's concept of smart growth to channel new development into development districts within designated development districts within a county in the county's comprehensive land use plan. So we also take, with respect to comprehensive land use plans, we take record notice of the staff report that was submitted by the planning director in this case, and also record notice of the action that was taken by the planning commission, wherein the planning commission of the town found comprehensive land use compatibility and recommended the application of the NCX zone to this project. So I think with that, our next speaker will be Mike Lenhart, our traffic engineer. And Mike, could you please summarize the traffic impact study submitted in this case?
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So we did conduct a traffic impact study for this project. It was submitted and it is attached on the town website as supporting documents. We looked at the intersections as shown on this site location map along Route 225 and the site access out to Quailwood Parkway and then up to Route 301. The findings of our study, and again, this was for an annexation evaluation. Future traffic studies will be required if this project gets approved and moves forward at the time of preliminary plan. Updated traffic impact study will be required. And at that time, that will have a little more teeth in terms of what's being reviewed and the potential for improvements. But at this time, we showed that all of the intersections will operate at acceptable levels of service, except for the intersection of 301 at Route 225. That intersection was projected to fail with or without this project. And there are improvements that are being pursued at that intersection by Heritage Green. Those are in design right now, involves widening the eastbound approach of Route 225, approaching Route 301, to include an additional left turn lane coming out of 225 to go north on 301. Those improvements, again, they're in the design phase and permitting with State Highway Administration. If this project gets approved and moves forward at the time of preliminary plan, the updated traffic study would include that as a background improvement and update the analyses and determine if any additional mitigation may be needed. Again, that would be at the preliminary plan stage.
So Mike, just a couple follow-up questions. So your traffic impact analysis was done in accordance with the transportation plan of the town, is that correct?
That's correct. And the town doesn't currently have any specific requirements. They typically have deferred to state and county requirements. And so this study did meet both state and county requirements. And that's correct.
And is it your understanding the town is currently in the process of reviewing and adopting a adequate public facilities ordinance, which will also speak to transportation and traffic?
That is correct. That's my understanding, although I have not seen it. I'm aware that that is in development.
Yes, and I understand from speaking with the planning director that that's in review by the town's attorney. Also, Mike, and the point of that is that the traffic impact analysis done for this purpose was based upon a conceptual plan submitted with the annexation petition. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then as you indicated, when and if this project becomes a reality at preliminary plan, the applicant will be required to submit a follow-up or a more detailed traffic impact analysis, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
And at that time, in accordance with, I guess, the anticipated adequate public facilities ordinance, the applicant will be required to mitigate any impacts, negative impacts on the flow of traffic and the operation of intersections. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. Okay,
so I guess again, the point is not to belabor it, is that this is a conceptual land use for an annexation. In that regard, I should mention the applicant is certainly willing to agree in an annexation agreement that this will be the land use of this property if the town so sees fit. We certainly don't want anybody to think we're going to get this property annexed and then change the land use. It's my understanding the planning director now prefers to keep annexation agreements a little less design oriented and to deal with the design in the design phase under the zoning ordinance. But to the extent that the town may want some detail in this annexation agreement, we're certainly willing to do that. And the other point of that is, again, and I think I might be repeating myself, but at the time that this project submits and pursues its preliminary plan for actual design and development, it will be required to submit a traffic impact analysis and to mitigate its impacts on traffic. Okay. And I think that brings us to Mark was going to provide some some conceptual home plans and facades. The ownership group is also has an affiliated home building side, and just if you'll indulge us, this is what we think we may be building on this property.
Next slide. As we know, the property is the northwestern corner of what would be the northwestern gateway into the town, and there is currently a bit of a fragmented entrance along that line into the town, and we want to clean that up and allow for an entrance feature on that northwestern end of the town. So that would just be a simple sign, welcome to La Plata type of sign. This is just a concept. The size and scale could change and the location obviously would change. We would have, next slide, please. Welcome signs coming into the community to create a sense of arrival there as well. And just a sample of what you may see in and throughout the community. Next slide, please. We did talk about pickleball courts and it's becoming its popularity, and it's an open sport. It's welcoming of all ages, from children to seniors of all ages. So we think it's a great amenity for the community, and it's becoming much more popular today. So next slide, please. The community will incorporate a network of fitness trails. They'll be designated with signage and indicators telling you what loop or what length of trail you've traveled, allowing for measuring of your fitness level. Next slide, please. The community retail concepts, more of a rural retail appearance, front porches, stone, varying materials, gables, and a more rural appearance rather than an urban appearance. That might house a local office, local business office, maybe a barber shop, or your typical community retail. Next slide, please. These are rear facing entrances. This would not face the Quailwood Parkway. The following slide would be something that would face Quailwood Parkway. So the garage entrances are along the rear of the Quailwood Parkway. And those would be something similar to what you would see on the towns. The residential component, single family detached residential component, just some typical concepts that you might see in the neighborhood, varying building materials, stone, siding. Your floor plans, the sizes of the homes would probably be in the 25 to 2,600 and up to 3,600 square feet. And I believe that it's going to wrap up our presentation. We have got one slide here left, I believe, once we get through the. Stacy, do you want to take that last one? Or Steve, you want to wrap it up?
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
So, thank you, Mark. The comprehensive land use plan for the town indicates in the community development element that one of the goals of the town is to quote, encourage a range of housing density, type, cost and size in new subdivisions to welcome a diverse population, end quote. That's an interesting goal, and certainly that something we see in a lot of jurisdictions in their comprehensive land use plans. I think that the question is the town going to grow? It seems clear that the town is going to grow. There are certainly development pressures, and we hear them all the time within the county and the town. Sometimes it's easy to forget that the town represents a very small percentage of the growth that occurs in the county in general. If you look at the percentages, it's I'd say extremely small compared to the growth that occurs within the county, and particularly St. Charles. I think that to accommodate growth within the town as a designated development district, this particular kind of project does provide and would provide a range of housing density and types, and would also provide a commercial component to serve the local community, serve some of the surrounding neighborhoods. We believe it could be excuse me, a project that provides a quality enhancement to the town, a gateway when coming in from the west side of town, towards town, and something the town could be proud to add to its community. And I think with that, we've talked enough. We'll answer questions if you have any.
All right, thank you so much for that presentation. I will open it up to council. All right, Councilman Goldsmith?
Yes, I think the biggest issue people are finding with this development or any development is the impact on traffic. You indicated you had done a previous traffic study, and there are some who've looked at that and said, well, that doesn't cover everything, but you're going to have to do a new one. When you did your initial one, were you also considering to put any potential for, say, the hub? We're also looking at the hub. Would those two things combine what the impact is going to be rather than yours independently?
I think I'll defer to Mike on that. Mike, did you hear that question?
I did, and forgive me, but when you said combined, what was the other development that you mentioned, the hub?
The hub is being considered as a potential annexation, and therefore that would bring in so many more homes and such, and it would access right there at Quailwood Parkway and 235 from the other side of the road. That would put even more traffic right at that singular location. Now, your previous study, I do not recall it saying anything about a traffic light. Would a traffic light be a potential improvement that would provide more controlled access to the 235?
At Quailwood Parkway at 225?
Yes.
It's possible that it could, but we have not done a warrant analysis. That's something that could be included as part of the traffic impact study scope when this project moves forward for a preliminary plan. But it was not included as part of this analysis.
Okay.
And just to explain, and Mike, throw something at me if I get this wrong. A warrant analysis would be an analysis of the impacts with respect to existing traffic and proposed development that is imminent, and would determine whether the state would allow the construction and an implementation of a traffic signal at that intersection. I think you see Heritage Green is undertaking several warrant analysis now in connection with their project.
As I've read all the inputs from people who provided inputs, earlier written input as such, traffic is the key thing that keeps jumping out. There are other issues as well, but traffic is the most important.
Yeah, we get that, and we do understand that under the town's adequate public facilities ordinance, as it will be adopted, this project will need to mitigate its impact on traffic, and surrounding intersections and surrounding roads will have to and will be required to function at an acceptable level of service, or what they call LOS, in order for this project to move forward.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's one other thing I'd like to point out, and adding to the statements at the opening of the presentation. This property is currently zoned, well, 1/3 of the property is currently zoned rural residential in the county. 2/3 or 32 acres is community commercial, CC. Community commercial allows permitted uses, the following permitted uses: hotel, convention center, conference center, trade or vocational schools, movie theaters, theaters and stadiums up to 1,000 seating capacity, professional offices, government buildings, medical offices, daycare centers, nursery schools with more than 30 children, retail centers with floor area greater than 15,000 square feet. So, I'd simply like to point out that for the annexation purposes, when you compare what is a permitted use currently under the county zoning versus what is proposed as the land uses under the in the town, if this annexation is approved, the potential traffic that could be generated is much lower in the town than what it could possibly be in the CC zoning. And so, that's just point of consideration.
Thank you. Councilwoman Bryant Ward?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilwoman Bryant Ward, Ward 3, the town of Decatur. I have 3 questions for you, Mark, and 1 for you, Stacy. Mark, when you met with the residents of Jamestown and Quellwood, do you know how many were present?
So we had several meetings and we had individual meetings at our office where we invited groups of 2 and 3 to come by, and there were several meetings. And I don't recall, that was years ago, I don't recall, but it was probably in the neighborhood of 15 to 20.
Per meeting or all
No,
together?
no, all together. And we then had an open meeting at the Legion Hall, and there was a room full of folks at the Legion Hall years ago, and we didn't take account on that. And then we had another one at the hotel here on 301. And there was a room full of folks there as well. There was a room full of folks there. So I don't recall the count, but I'm going to guess 2 to 3 dozen at that one. But
So thank you. So after your meetings, you stated that you would revise the concept of plans based upon the input that you got. So the last rendition of your plans that you have currently, were the residents made aware of that last rendition and were they okay with that?
so we did not have a follow-up meeting with the neighboring communities after the last concept plan. It was introduced to the town, and we had eliminated the multifamily and the high density residential, and we did not have a follow-up meeting with the neighbors. No.
Thank you. Stacy, in your presentation, you stated that the development review would be considered after annexation. Has there been a review of the development process prior to the annexation? You have taken.
Oh, yes, we've submitted plans and they've been reviewed. I was just trying to say that there's a more detailed review that comes should the property be annexed.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify. I didn't hear that part. It just stated as if you would not review it until after annexation.
Oh, no,
I
it's
wanted
been
to make
reviewed
sure that was
thoroughly.
not the case.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
You're
There
welcome.
was 33 people present at the 33 people present at the.
Okay.
When
Thank-
was that held, Mark?
It's been several years. It's been several years. The date was not on that.
How were they notified?
I think we sent letters to the adjoining property owners.
Stacy's shaking her head.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
So it was early on in the design process. And I think probably some of the folks in this room may not have gotten letters or may not have lived in the community, but we do have letters that we sent to neighboring.
Certified letters, neighbors got it.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your help.
Could we wait a minute? Hey, could we, wait a minute? You will have your opportunity during a public hearing. It's not a public shouting. So let's make sure that we give them opportunity to respond. They have documents right there who they were mailed to. And if you want to follow through with them afterwards, you can surely do that to see if your name was on there. But they said it was several years ago. So that's, and they have documented proof. So I've got to go on that. But if you would refrain, I know I get excited too. If you would refrain from shouting, I would greatly appreciate that. Council, any other questions? Councilman Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilman Jenkins, Ward 4. Just a couple of questions real quick. I don't believe the referred traffic study, it did not include the intersection to the west, that is intersection with Mitchell Road in Maryland 225.
I think that's correct. Yes.
It did not include that
And
intersection.
not to my knowledge. No.
That's maybe something to think about in the
Okay.
future.
We'd certainly look into that.
And then I may have asked this question before, so bear with me if I repeat it. In the different analysis, the studies, was the same number of dwelling units used consistently for all the studies? That is 158 or whatever the number, were the same numbers used for all the studies? Because I know a while ago, there were different numbers for each of the studies. So I'm just,
Park Ranger Apartments. And is that?
No, what I'm talking about is when you did the traffic study and the water and sewer, was it the same number? I think it's what, 58 townhouses and 100 and something things. Was that
So-
number consistently used in all studies?
On the most recent study,
Yes.
that's where those were the numbers used on the most recent
Okay.
traffic study and the most recent water and sewer analysis.
Thank you. And then finally, did the fiscal impact study talk about the impact on the town's operating and maintenance costs once the town assumes ownership of the roads and the other public infrastructure on the site?
No.
Thank you.
But we would certainly expect those costs to be consistent with what the town experiences on its other roads and infrastructure. I don't have any reason to believe they would be inconsistent or out of the ordinary or extraordinary in any way.
Thank you. Councilman Trollinger.
Thank you. Councilman Matt Trollinger, Ward 2. I have a couple questions that kind of cover a number of different topics. The current iteration of the plan that we have before us, when did that kind of solidify?
It was August of last year.
Okay, so just in looking back at the last time meeting with the community, several years, do we think it was more than 5 years ago or potentially? I guess my question is, it seems to have been a priority, so much so that the plans changed almost every time. But this last iteration didn't include kind of going back out into the community and saying, okay, based on these things, here we are, any last input. And maybe you looked at this process as that moment, but I was curious as to why in this last iteration, we didn't get there.
So I'd have to say that the major concern at the time were the apartments, and they're gone. The apartments are gone. So we didn't feel as though, we have a like use. It's residential against residential. It's towns against community with towns. And I didn't feel that that another meeting to say, hey, the apartment is gone, is it okay now, was, I think that's where we're at now.
Okay. Thank you. I know this is a concept and the land use may shift and change according to the market, according to population growth. But sometimes when we get these annexation plans, we have a good idea as to estimated preserved space out of the total building area, right? So out of the 53 plus or minus, half acres, what are we looking at as far as the open space? I can't kind of tell from the map itself, but what land in this area is preserved or not to be built upon as currently concept?
Sure. I don't have an actual acreage for you today, but I will mention that there's quite a bit of green space that we left on purpose in between the towns and the singles. There's a significant green space there. There's also buffer yards. These are single family homes. So you're going to have, a lot with a home and a driveway. So each lot will have green space. So while I don't have an acreage, as you can see by the green indicated on the concept, there's quite a bit of green space there.
There's also Stream Valley.
There is a stream valley there, correct?
Can you talk about the Stream Valley for?
Sure, the stream valley runs in between the towns and the concepts there. You can see it kind of runs up through that green space. We're preserving that entire area. There is a crossing of the stream at the tip of the stream there with our access roadway just for circulation, but other than that, we're not disturbing it.
Okay, and that's for reference point, page 121 of 144, probably of the agenda packet. So among part of this concept is that there are trails throughout this community. And I don't know what slide that was, but it was helpful because you indicated different, levels of fitness or activity through it. But it looked like the majority of the trail kind of rounded out that open space. And then it looked like it kind of just traveled along the width of the neighborhood and then back around. Is that counting part of the trail is that it just kind of reroutes through the neighborhood and to the front?
Yeah, that is part of the trail. It's the walks within the neighborhood and the walks in the open space.
Okay. Lastly, I think is there's been a lot of talk about seemingly the opportunity that the developer and I think the community has as to coming into La Plata versus being developed in Charles County, right? Based on the different zoning. Was there ever a competing or alternative plan presented to the county if the town did not annex this property? As far as what was going to be presented and what the use was. I know we can come up with the ways that it could be used, but was there ever a presented plan to the county as alternative?
No, and it's been a long process, and we've discussed over the years, should we just toss our hat, toss in the towel on the town and go to the county and develop it within the county, and we didn't want to present another concept that may be less desirable to the neighborhoods and feel as though we were strong arming anyone. So this is really what we want to do, and this is what we've presented. We've been building in the county and several counties since 1975, and it's a family-owned business, and we're small developers, and we build your churches, we build your fire stations, we build your jails. We build your schools, and we think we can present a nice neighborhood for the town, and that's what we want to do.
I find it interesting as to the evolution between kind of just the different stages. It seems to, I mean, I don't know, at one point you had an amphitheater, at one point you had a baseball field at the middle, and I know that may not be practical in some elements, but I mean, as far as the uniqueness of this particular neighborhood versus where a resident or a community member could see in any other part of Charles County, you would say it's our open space that you're presenting, and what's different here?
Well, I think where we ended up is where we heard the community telling us to go. That's what's, and maybe what's different is that it's not different.
Understand. And the commercial part at the front end, that's seen as a later stage development as far as that.
Yeah, the retail
space.
component,
Yes.
retail component maybe. Yeah, it may be.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you all very
Great.
much.
I just have two questions before we open up the floor to hear from our great residents here. As a developer, one thing that struck me as quite amazing is that you didn't stick with the hotel concept in single family home, where you know that if you built right now and stayed with the CCRR zoning as the county did and just slid over to ours and requested something similar to that, that you wouldn't have to wait 5 years. Why did you choose not to build a hotel or some large type of retail and residential and stay right in that lane and build immediately instead of possibly having to wait for a 5-year waiver?
Well, again, we are part of the community, and we do want to see something happen with this piece of ground, and we want something that is going to be embraced by the community, and those items just weren't, we didn't get the warm and fuzzies from anyone about those items. There wasn't we did do some studies on the theater, and we were moving quite well with the theater at one point, and it's a large expense, it's a large area, it's a large impervious area, it's a large impact on traffic, and we just thought at that time that it was probably not the way to go, that the residential was the way to go.
Thank you for that. And the other thing is, you're talking about some commercial components that will be within this development. Did you give any idea? I know this is a concept, so of community space. I know that in the town of La Plata, there's a lot of nonprofits that seek out community space. Is that something that you have given any thought to?
We'd certainly consider it. You know, we have not been approached by any nonprofits, and we have not approached any nonprofits, but we would certainly consider, we'd certainly consider a nonprofit.
Wonderful. All right, thank you for that. We are going to move down on the agenda where it says, or into the public hearing, I should say. Written
Thank you very much.
documents. Oh, don't, you're not done yet.
We were heading
We're
out
gonna
the
come
door.
back right at you. We haven't excused you yet. So I'm going to ask Mr. Town Clerk, has there been any written documentation entered into the record?
Yes, Madam Mayor and Council, they have been attached to the agenda.
Thank you very much. Mr. Town Clerk, could you please give me a list of the people who have signed up to speak this evening?
I would like to add that the box allowing people online to speak hasn't been opened, the
Ah.
chat box.
Thank you. Once the public hearing started, there was, we were not taking any more speakers. So I will go down here if, thank you for this. For speakers, when you are called upon to speak, please state your name and whether you live in the incorporated town limits, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you all would, if you do want to sit over here so that, because I'm going to call you back up afterwards, whatever you're comfortable. Yes, thank you very much. All right. The town clerk, okay, thank you. So first on the list, Keith Horton. Come on down, or if you're online, you have 3 minutes to please get your point across.
Good afternoon, council. My name is Keith Horton. I live in Quailwood. First, let me say my comments are going to be directed toward the council. I understand that the representatives have an obligation to not only represent the interests of the developer, but it's my understanding under their model rules of professional responsibility, they have to zealously advocate on behalf of the developer's interests. But I bring that up because that's the developer's interest. And I have to say, it's been pretty staggering to me to listen to a lot of the back and forth, because it seems to me, with all due deference, that the council and the planning commission has really been preoccupied as to whether they could grant this annexation, as opposed to a lot more outreach from the council to the community as to whether you even should do this annexation. Again, I say this with respect. I grew up here. I went to Milton Summers. I graduated from McDonough High School. I went on to college at University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Thereafter, I went to law school at University of Maryland. And I bring that up because I'm so proud of the community that I came from, because I really believe that I got the tools and the teachers here to help me to excel both in college and in graduate school. But I have to say, as equally as proud as I am to the community and how I was brought up here, I'm distressed because I really believe that this council and the planning commission is really putting too much emphasis on what the developer wants and their interests, as opposed to what the community wants. And we feel like that there just has not been the outreach. I would have to imagine, I can just see this, to me, it's staggering the amount of documents that are going back and forth between the council and the planning commission and the developer. And if you would compare that to the lack of outreach that's happened between the council and the planning commission and the community, I mean, if we were doing the scales of justice, it's overwhelmingly tilted towards the developer against us in the community. So again, with utmost respect, and I'm sorry that I even have to feel like I have to take the time. But I would remind you kindly that ultimately that you're accountable to us as the constituents in the community. And I understand the developers looking for a return on their investment. And again, they have an obligation to represent their interests. But I would also ask that you please take into consideration the community, and those are the most directly impacted. Because after all, if you have, and I don't know, maybe some of these people are going to come and
Mr.
speak in
Horton,
favor.
that's your time. Thank you.
But if I just may close, but please listen to us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Ian Woodford?
Everybody. I just want to let you know, I'm not in the corporated town of La Plata. But I do live on 225 in Quailwood, right there on the corner. And with a lot of us in the area, we've replaced our wells and we have holding tanks. So I know the structure is not there for sewer and all of that stuff. It's only been a year since I put a new well in. And also, as far as the traffic goes, I've had a lot of cars in my yard as lawn ornaments because they get hit. And let me see here. I really don't want all this across the street. I've been here 20 years, 20 plus years. And it's quiet now. And it really needs to stay that way. So that's about it.
Thank you very much. Brad Williams? Please state your name so that we can hear that too.
Yeah, Brad Williams, 25 Pocahontas Court in La Plata. I have a bunch of bullets I want to point out. I'm going to try to stay away from the traffic and things like that. But bear with me. First of all, the comprehensive plan keeps getting mentioned. But do you realize how hard that document is to find? And the number one goal on the comprehensive plan is to develop the downtown. And I have not seen progress in that. Why aren't we strengthening La Plata from the core and building out before we grow and then try to fix the inside? Sewage has mentioned quite a bit. Not my current house on Pocahontas, but another house in La Plata I lived in. I stood in my basement on multiple occasions as gray water came up through the toilet and shower because the pump station failed. Okay, there's a long history of issues with sewage in La Plata that needs to still be addressed before we add on. They said they're going to add, improve it, but my guess, and with respect to, making money, and probably only improve as much as they need. I've also been told, as far as sewage and water, that it's going to tie directly in my yard. Nobody's contacted me to talk about that. I may be wrong on that. Okay, but with somebody's being open about talking to the community, I think I would be one of the first ones to talk to. Okay. Speaking of the question you asked, why didn't you just go ahead and build? I've been told they can't build here unless they tie into the La Plata sewage. Again, might be wrong on that, but I've been told it's going to be 20 years from now until the county can handle that. Again, I might be wrong. I know that Rainbow Construction, they took a gamble knowing that when they bought this from the Legion a number of years ago. Okay. Recreation keeps getting mentioned. I know pickleball is a popular sport, but I also know we got multiple sports leagues that go on wait lists. Kids can't get in. Okay. Build our recreational facilities all over the town before we add more people. We got soccer and football players that are waitlisted, can't play because they can't field. There's not enough opportunity. I guess the league is overgrown. Okay. I question whether Western La Plata has been neglected. Oh, we can build over there, no big deal. Let's not build on this side, but we can expand on Western La Plata. And if you know anything about Charles County, the western side of the county is very protective of their land and their history. Okay, I don't think anybody would want this on the western side. Okay. Heritage Green Steeplechase was apparently approved 30 years ago, and you as a board get to deflect all that negativity by saying that was 30 years ago. Okay, oh, that was approved 30 years ago, not us. Now's the chance to think about that.
That is your time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. John Moore?
Hi, my name's Sean Moore. I live at 15 Pocahontas. So this project is my backyard. I have a lot of issues with this project. However, obviously, I only have 3 minutes. A couple things I wanted to mention was the fact that the company says they're going to, upgrade the sewer system. However, they're not taking into consideration the operation and maintenance costs, which will come back on us through our taxes. So our increase of taxes by them trying to do this project. And since I have minimum time, I just want you all to remember that this vote is your vote. It's not a public vote. If it was a public vote, I don't think it would pass for annexation. You all are here today, sitting in your seats. You are citizens of this small town. You took this job obviously because you love this town. I love it. I'm not originally from here. I'm from New York originally. I moved down here for work. I've been here for the past 20 years. I want you to take that into consideration when you do take this vote, because a lot of this isn't about making our town better. It's making our town bigger. It's supposed to be a town. It's not a town. It's going to turn into a city. We have this huge project going on right now that connects White Plains Golf Course all the way down to Loveland. You're bringing way too much people into this town way too quickly. Too much construction. It's going to ruin this town. It's not going to be a town anymore. You're going to have to change it to the city of La Plata. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Patricia, I think, is it Sullivan? Patricia, I'm sorry, I can't read the last name. At 110 Oriole Lane. All right, we'll move on. Rachel, Christmas.
I live in 108 Oriole
Could you
Lane.
make sure you state your name, please?
Yeah, Rachel Christmas. I'm in 108 Oriole Lane. I've lived there for 8 years, so I knew about the development before we moved in. We were told that. But I just have a quick question. I know the hub is going to have quite a lot of houses there. So we're looking maybe about 7,000 to 8,000 people that might be coming into this town. What kind of population with the hub, taking that into account, are we looking if the Hawthorne development with 100 and how many single family houses you have in there? What kind of population are we looking at when you combine that with the hub coming into La Plata?
Hey, when they get back up there, we'll ask.
Oh, okay,
them.
sorry.
Is that all you have?
Yes, that was one question for me.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Karen Mitchell?
My name is Karen Mitchell. I'm at 116 Squirrelswood Park. I'm right off the river banks. My home sits in the middle of the vacant property in the front of my home as you come down Squirrelswood Parkway. No one has come and mentioned anything about homes being built on that property at all. And I'm kind of absurd about it because I bought the property for cattle. When I retire, I want to have cattle, chickens, and some farmland. 5 acres is what I have. I'm not looking forward to neighbors that close. Because I moved from Temple Hills down here just so that I could raise animals for my consumption and for my family. Not to be bombarded by the sewage line coming in, the water line coming in, and not to mention no one is telling us what's really going on with this property and how it's going to affect us. Because it's going to affect us. It's going to. And then we're gonna have to be the ones to pay for it.
Thank you very much. Jan Gray? Have you all signed up also? I know.
They're not speaking, they're my witnesses.
Okay.
Because I'm going to start with clarifying about the meeting that happened at the hotel on 301.
Okay, you have
Okay.
3 minutes. Thank you. State your name and.
Jean Gray, 9130 Hawthorne Road. I don't know, she is also an adjacent property. And this is Barbara Gray, who has 206 Hawthorne Road. Anyway, there was a meeting, only one that we received notice of at 9130, which is directly across. That was the one at the hotel. There were not a couple of dozen or 3 dozen people. There were approximately 100 people. I know because my family brought 30 to 35 people just ourselves. And we only took up a little section. And we were all against it because part of the thing that they were telling us at the time was that they were going to put something like a 7-Eleven as commercial property over there. And they were sort of, and so we were all against it. One of the things that concerns me most about this, what's going on here, is it appears to me, even with this whole 3-minute thing, when you know you don't have that many people, that the town is trying to limit the input of the residents. On April it used to be a public planning commission. Those meetings were public. As soon as I got on and said, I want to submit letters, all of a sudden the town changed the rules so that the planning commission is no longer having public meetings and we aren't allowed to submit and they don't take any. That was on April the 5th that happened. I went to the March meeting, April 5th. It's now private, not public. You're sitting here telling us now that we're going to have a design planning that's going to go in front of the planning commission, that the planning commission gets to input it on the design, that we're not even going to get to participate in because the town changed the rules for us to be able to publicly participate. So it seems as if for our feelings, like it's like the town really doesn't want to hear from us. Lack of notice. There was one sign on Quailwood, never was on 225 for the meeting that was on June 21st. Finally, they post another sign on 225 after this meeting was posted in tall grass. You drive by right now, you can't see that sign. It's there, but you can't see it because it's totally covered by tall grass. It also was put at the edge of 225 by Quailwood Parkway, not up by the baseball field where people may actually be interested that are still going to games. That's our national pastime. I've been here 60 years old. For 55 years, my family, my mother, we've been playing baseball on those fields. You could get college scholarships. You can go to high school. We have people that you can go be in a major league baseball field. And now you're getting rid of little league baseball for pickleball, where there are no college scholarships. There is no pathway to a major professional sport.
Ms. Gray, that's your time. Thank you.
Yes, I understand that. So it appears as if I'm not going to talk about the town water and sewer. I am going to talk about the density though. Right now, that traffic plan, they knew Pine Street, they knew Bivens Place, they knew Starwood Place, they knew Magnolia, they knew of all those intersections, but yet they just totally ignore the fact that we can't get on to 225. I'm going to let it go right now because I understand it is but I think you need to realize how we feel, how the town feels. Okay. Quailwood was built on 2 streams. Those people's yards are flooding right now. It's like 2 rivers back there. And we're going to put more housing back there on top of more streams that weren't even adequately, the culverts weren't adequately done in the beginning.
Anyway, I know you guys don't care about Bivens family and our 80 acres over there that we don't have town water and sewer, but I do hope that you will at least leave a little bit of town, a little bit of water and sewer left for these 80 acres who help establish this town. We have been there almost 100 years. And we would appreciate a little water and sewer as well. Thank you.
John Volante?
Good evening, everyone. I'm not really planned or prepared for this because I was away at work and all of a sudden I got a phone call last night that there's a meeting today. Back to the signs that were posted, there aren't any signs other than the ones in the woods by Mount Carmel Estates Monastery. You can't see unless you're going into the church and you're looking into the trees, looking at the deer. Emails, letters, we didn't receive any over there. The traffic, you want to talk about putting a road from 301 through my neighborhood. I'm a residential area. There's 5-year-old kids, 3-year-old kids playing out there. Now you got someone coming off of 301 doing 55. You expect them to slow down to 25 or 15? They're not going to do it, especially with all these new hot rods out there. There's a lot of other complaints, but because of my nerves, I shouldn't be up here at all. And my sailor vocabulary will start coming out. So I'm going to be very nice and say, please don't vote this in. We have a beautiful little hometown community. You start putting in these large areas for people to move in and this so-called playground and this hub. Who uses our playgrounds now? Who's going to maintain this playground? Who's going to maintain this hub? That means we're going to have to hire more people through the PLATA and pay them. It means my taxes are going up. How about the fire department? You got 3,000 to 5,000 more people moving in the area. Police support. How about the schools? We're overcrowded now. We don't have qualified teachers to fill our school. Don't do this to us, please.
Thank you. Those are all the speakers that have signed up. If the applicant can come back down, I'm going to open it up for additional questions by council.
Were the people who wanted to give them a fair opportunity to sign up? Because it sounded like they did not.
I'm sorry. Mr. Manuel?
Yes, Mayor James.
When we started the public hearing, were the people allowed to get on or
Yeah, it's my understanding, I pulled it up on my computer. Mr. Scott had identified that there was no one on the meeting. So I believe we restarted the meeting, and at which time the public hearing had already began at that point. So I think we had a faulty link that we then rectified. But having said that, I do not believe people on currently were given the opportunity to sign up because we had to go to a separate link.
Okay, did we have anybody on line? I will entertain that because since we did not have a link that was working. Is Mr. Town Clerk, do you see anyone that is online that indicated they would like to speak?
I see a hand up.
I see two. I see two hands up. Could you please indicate who they are, Mr. Town Clerk?
Kelly, can you see who they are?
Madam Mayor, I have a hand showing for Donna Jenkins and for Tony Stefko.
Okay, I will entertain those two to speak at our public hearing. I will go with Ms. Jenkins. Go ahead and state your name and whether you're in the incorporated town limits, and please try to keep your comments within 3 minutes.
Ms. Jenkins, you'll need to unmute yourself. Ms. Jenkins, this is Kelly Phipps. There you go.
All right, well, she's getting ready. Could we go to Tony? I can't see Tony's last name.
Mr. Stefko, this is Kelly Phipps. Can you unmute your microphone? Madam Mayor, Michael Hardy has raised his hand to speak.
All right, let's have Michael then. Michael, can you, we can't hear you if you're speaking.
Mr. Stefko is going to speak.
All right, I see him lighting up.
Yes,
Tony?
yes, sorry about that. There was a problem.
Okay,
with
go
the
ahead,
mute
Tony.
button. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
My apologies. There was problems with the mute button. It wasn't letting us unmute, but now it is. So I think we're okay. So my name's Tony Stefko. I'm a member of the Charles St. Mary's Baseball League. I'm on the board of directors, and we've been using that property for many, many years. And when this property was acquired by the potential developer who's petitioning for annexation right now, they could have made a decision to immediately use that property for whatever they wanted, storage of materials, equipment, anything that made sense for their business. But instead, they chose to allow us as a community and a organization that's been involved in the community for many years to continue to use the property at no cost. And they've even contributed to our league via services and resources to maintain the property and improve the property so that we could use it over the years. I've known this developer, and it is my opinion that they are doing this in the best interest of the community. The area is growing and it's going to grow. We've heard several options of what could be developed on this site. Theaters, hotels, hospital, things like that. And I think that the residents should consider, what could be versus what's being proposed here. Because something will be built eventually, whether it gets, I'm realistic that something's going to be built, whether it's via this annexation or some other means. At some point, the area is growing. The population is increasing. It's a desirable area. And a lot of the folks that are speaking up, they have very nice homes to live in the town of La Plata. And to me, this is just increasing the number of very nice homes to live in. Given some other options, I think this is really good for the community, even though it would result in, the fields that we use being removed. But we consider ourselves very fortunate to have use of them over the last 10 to 15 years since it was acquired. And I fully support this and the development. And I think that if you're a resident nearby or a neighbor, you should really think about what could go there versus this, because something will end up going there. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Donna Jenkins, are you able to speak now?
Yes, thank you so much. I just want to say I know how to use Teams. I've used Teams for the last 4 years, and I was muted by the town clerk, so I was unable to mute myself. So if I can have my time start over again.
Oh, it just started. You're good.
Okay, so good evening, Mayor, council members, fellow constituents. My name is Donna Jenkins. I live at 5520 Littlebrook Drive, not in the town limits, but I do own 2 properties within the corporate limits. I'm speaking tonight in my opposition of the annexation to both Hawthorne Yards, which is under consideration today, but also the hub at La Plata. This is because the 2 projects are associated with codependencies. As per the state of Maryland's planning department letter to you, Mayor James, dated 11 July 22, I also oppose the future change in any zoning to rural residential And while I respect the opinion of the gentleman that went before me about what could go there, there's still a lot of things that the public can comment on and can prevent from being developed there just because it's residential or commercial. So I'm speaking tonight, and I do want to talk about my opposition in a moment, but because of the rescheduling of this and all of the technical difficulties from this meeting, I respectfully request that the public record be kept open for a minimum of 60 days to allow all constituents to have the opportunity to make public comment. I'd also like to say, while the county and the town have decided that La Plata should be the next urban area for development, they apparently are not talking to their constituents, and the majority of the residents of La Plata do not want Hawthorne Yards, the hub, or any more high-density development. We will begin petitioning the town and the county to change the current comprehensive land plan and future planning efforts through referendum if it's required. Let's keep urbanization in Waldorf and St. Charles, not in La Plata. So the reasons that I oppose the annexation is the inadequate infrastructure to support the estimated 365 persons the Hawthorne Yard anticipates to bring in, but the more than 1,600 units for the hub. The county's school systems are overcrowded. There's a shortage of law enforcement and other social services. There's inadequate youth facilities for the current residents, besides the unbearable traffic congestion on 301, 225 Mitchell, and many other roads. Residents of 225 don't want their road widened as indicated by the developer. Why should the current residents suffer because of that desires? Councilman Goldsmith, for your awareness, stoplights don't aid in traffic congestion. They create it. They're designed for safety, not for traffic flow. Most importantly is the limited resources, specifically the water and sewer. The town, as you know, is in negotiations with the county to purchase water, and these current conditions exist now. They haven't even begun to consider the impacts of the already approved Heritage Green of the 3,170 units there and the Rosewood Crossing high density steeplechase neighborhood that is now with the duplexes and townhomes. So despite this developer offering to invest in the water station, it doesn't consider the already approved annexations. Again, you've not taken a
Ms.
look at
Jenkins,
all
that's
of
your
these
time.
as a-
Thank you.
Well, I would just like to say, please, I urge you to make the right decision, deny this annexation.
Thank you very much. And is it Michael?
It's Cambry Hardy, the spouse. So thank you very much. We've been following this since we heard about it. We bought here several years ago. We bought here because we had lived here for a year renting in the house that we bought, and we loved La Plata. We loved the small town feel. And all of our neighbors said, La Plata wants to stay small. They didn't bring in the super Target because we want to stay small. Wouldn't let Walmart expand. We want to stay small. And that's big appeal, especially for those of us who, work in DC. We want a certain way of life for our kids. I commuted to DC for a while. Thankfully, the pandemic hit, silver lining, and I got to telework for a long time. But I would drive from my neighborhood in Quailwood down Bumpy Oak and go hit Indian Head Highway. And the traffic I see on 225 anyway now scares me, because you'll be sitting there doing what you're supposed to do, waiting at the light because someone ahead of you wants to turn, and you've got the people speeding past you on the right to get around to beat the intersection because they don't want to wait. I can't tell you how many accidents I've almost seen. We have had accidents there. We bring in more and more people into the community. It's gonna get worse. I was there right on Quailwood just a couple months ago when someone got hit in our neighborhood. A kid on a bike was hit by someone speeding down Quailwood Parkway. It happens all the time. Having a big development right across the way, the hub, worries me with the traffic. As it is, I work in Indian Head now, and sometimes I wait at the intersection at 6:30 in the morning, and it takes me 5 minutes to turn left out of my neighborhood to head towards Indian Head. Another thing is, the schools are getting more and more crowded. My child is one that's getting redistricted to Pequawatson. I hear it's a great school. She's now going to be bused 25 minutes out of the way because the schools are too crowded. If we bring in that many more housing units between this development and the hub. What's that going to do to our school system? Getting her bus that far away does affect people. I'm thinking, how am I going to get off of work so she can do these after school activities and participate in the clubs? It really does affect a lot of parents. With regard to the water issue, I'm on one of the properties that has a spring right behind my house. And if you look at the original plat to the Quillwood neighborhood, there is on my property marked culvert for overflow for spring, for natural spring. And right now I have a 3-foot sinkhole in my front yard where the pipe and the culvert has rusted through and it's washing my yard away. And I've gone over it with Mr. Stahl and they say they're going to fix it. That's been over a year and I'm watching my yard get smaller and smaller. If you build behind me and cover all of that up with concrete, well, I wonder what it's going to do to the house that they build on the spring. But where's that water going to go?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That will conclude our public comment. If I could have the applicants back down here and questions from the council for the applicants. Any other questions? I do have a question. One of the speakers wanted to know what kind of population we would be looking at. And she had indicated that when she purchased the property, she knew about the development. And what kind of population are we looking at between the hub and I know you can't speak of the hub because you're not representing them, but in your conceptual idea of what is going to be built there, what kind of population are you looking at right there for Hawthorne Yards?
So the town does have a pupil generation factor, and I don't have that information here, but the town does have one that they use when calculating school seats required and so forth. But if there was a number thrown out there around 350 residents, total. I mean, there's 201 properties, but if you're going to generate 2 to 3 occupants per or 4 in some cases, some less, it's maybe 300.
There's a formula out there. I
Yeah, there
think
is.
Director Harrington probably has that.
There is.
And we'll follow up with her on that. One thing that I heard, several people indicate that there were not, the signs were not visible and they did not know about this hearing tonight, I guess. Well, obviously they found out about it because they are here and I appreciate that. Could you please tell me where the signs were and if you could tell me who was approached? Were there letters mailed? What kind of outreach was there from you all?
So notice of the hearing was given in accordance with the town ordinance. Notice to adjoining landowners is given by the town by mail. I believe that's regular mail or certified mail.
The initial hearing was by certified mail.
Okay.
4 publications in the newspaper and the signs.
Okay, and the posting was done on July 1st, and we have an affidavit of posting, and we also provided the town clerk with pictures, and in those photographs, the signs are clearly visible from the street.
Okay, thank you. Council, any other questions? Councilwoman Bryant Ward.
Councilwoman Bryant Ward, Ward 3. I just had one question and it just stuck with me. I think her name is Karen Mitchell, indicated that she had 5 acres of land and she wanted to farm. How does that, her 5 acres, play into your development?
Not sure where Miss Mitchell is. I didn't hear exactly where she was.
On the house, the big house that sits where no one else is around. Because I have the creek on one side, and the creek's in the front, and the creek's in the back. So when you turn down Hillsville Parkway, and you were to come down, I'm right there where that big sign used to be sitting up there where the vacant house is.
On the
So
left?
I'm right there where all those trees are. It's a big brick house right up there.
On the left?
So my home is right behind that house where all the trees are.
I guess my question is more, does your development impact her 5 acres?
So there shouldn't be a physical impact. We have examples in Southern Maryland all over the place where residential projects butt up against agricultural or farm uses. It's not unusual. There shouldn't, well, I can tell you there's no impact on her legal ability to legally use her property. No, in that respect, no impact.
Thank you very much. Mr. Scott, I will give you the floor for any closing statements you would like to make.
Madam Mayor, this is going to be very unlawyer-like, but I think we've beat this up as much as we can. So unless there are any other questions, we'll thank the mayor and council for their time. Thank you for the concerned citizens' time, and we'll close our arguments or our presentation.
Thank you very much. I move to close this hearing tonight. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Per local government articles, section 4-406E, a public hearing may be rescheduled or continued from the original hearing date for no more than 30 days. That's law. That's not our code. That's state law. As you recall, the initial public hearing was scheduled for June 21st. At that time, the town elected to have it postponed and continued until July 18th. There is no provision in the state law that allows for further postponement or continuance. So tonight, as we close this hearing, the hearing is closed. That does not mean we don't still hear you. That just means we are not accepting any more public comment on this issue. We will, it is on our agenda today to see whether or not we vote on the resolution. But I appreciate everyone who has been here this evening that has contributed either by listening or writing in. And we are elected by the members of the town of La Plata. And so we hear you. And I love that you're out here. Continue to come out here. And it's not, as one person said, it's kind of like and didn't use the words rubber stamping. We're not doing that. We hear you. And we take all of this into consideration. So thank you very much for all of your comments, written and spoken. And this public hearing is closed. All right, moving on to the next matter of discussion, seat allocations for FY23. Thank you very much. Director Harrington. Mr. Manuel, oh, there she is. Director Harrington, come on down.
Yeah, I'd spoken with her about getting with Miss Christmas on the population estimate.
Okay, thank you very much.
So that may have been where her delay.
Here she is.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
So for the school seat allocations for the FY 2023 cycle, the town was scheduled to discuss this previously, but we were able to get some updated numbers from the county's June 7th meeting with the Board of Education. So under the town code, the council may set the number of available school seat allocations in accordance with Chapter 173. Which will serve as a basis for allocation of school seats to eligible projects. Town council shall annually determine the number of school seats that the town will make available for allocation for new residential development in the town during the town's ensuing fiscal year. except that in no event shall the school seats available for allocation in each fiscal year be less than 100. So this is a direct quote from our town code. In the making of this annual determination, the council shall consider the number of available school seats in the entire Charles County Public School System and the ratio of the town's population to the population of the county as a whole. In addition to other factors that the town council deems relevant, the council shall consider data and recommendations, if any, from the Charles County Board of Education as to the number of available school seats in the public school system and number of school seats that the town should allocate for new residential development. And just noting that a final subdivision plat cannot be approved by the Planning Commission and building permits cannot be issued if there are no school seats available as determined by the council. So I'll summarize the discussion section. Last year under FY 2022, we issued 100 school seats for 7 development projects. The county also issued 200 single-family dwelling school seat allocations to the Heritage Green development as they were purchased in December of 2021. And then more recently, they purchased 200 multifamily dwelling school seat allocations in June under the Development Rights and Responsibilities Agreement that was approved between the town and the county in November of 2021. So staff reviewed the official student enrollment count that we received by the Board of Education on June 7th of 2022. That has been attached to the agenda for your review. According to the enrollment counts, there were 26,794 students enrolled in the Charles County Public School System. Charles County Planning and Growth Management had provided a capacity and enrollment comparison for the 2021 to 2022 school year. They indicated that the state-rated capacity for all schools was 28,255. The state-rated capacity at 110%, which is what the county uses, is 31,081. And that the total number of available school seats were 4,233. So if you look at the 2020 census that was recently done, Charles County had a population of 166,617, while the town had a population of 10,159. Therefore, the town's population accounts for approximately 6% of the total population within the county. And utilizing Chapter 173-95, the town could allocate 253.98 school seats, which is 6% of the available school seat allocations that was noted by the county. And I've pointed out just a summary of the schools that are directly within the town of La Plata that we utilize, including the elementary, middle, and high schools. And then I did put in the 2021 to 2022 yield factors. They didn't really change from last year, so they would remain the same. The council had previously stipulated that we would utilize their yield factors. So in conclusion, staff recommends that the council review the reference documentation and determine the number of school seat allocations that will be made available during FY 2023. I did provide a draft school seat allocation eligibility list. You'll see a few of those are pending for approval going before the Planning Commission in August and September. And then I also included the school seat tracking sheet for the Heritage Green subdivision, which shows what they've purchased so far. So with that, if you have any questions with me, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you very much, Director Harrington. Before I open it up to council, I do have a question. One of the concerns we heard this evening is the overpopulation of schools. So could the town of La Plata issue use and occupancy permits to the developer without consideration of overpopulating the schools? You just indicated that we could have, based on a percentage, do 254 school seats. Could we issue all of them and because that would be our percentage and force an overpopulation, or how does that work?
So our town code was written in 2005. I don't know the specifics of, how that was created. I know it had to do with the wastewater treatment plant being built and the debt factor that was included in that. And that's why they came up with the minimum of 100 school seat allocations. That is really the town council to decide. It does state that you can take input from the Board of Education. We did get the report from the county, and the county stated that there was 4,223 school seats available. per our town code. I just plugged in the numbers, and so that's technically what we could allocate. Now, the council can choose not to. You can keep it to the minimum of 100. You can say that you want to put in the 253 school seats, and then if we don't utilize them all, we don't utilize them all. But that is completely up to the council. I know the Board of Education is here tonight. I did make sure to extend the invitation. And I know the county, I'm not sure if Ben Yeckley was on, but I did invite him as well. Yes, he is on the call. So if you had any questions for the county or the Board of Education, they are available.
Thank you very much. Council, do we have any questions?
Jim Holzer, Ward 1. I was surprised that how many seat allocations were still available. I keep hearing we're overcrowded. Your chart and your statistics say we're not. You just made a statement. We're 4,000 seats under what our capacity is.
What I will note is that the Charles County Planning and Growth Management had created those numbers. I did not. I just attached them to the agenda, so you had that background information. And so you'll notice that the state rated capacity is 28,255. Charles County uses a 110% factor when they do their calculations. So that's where they came up with the 3,081, and that's how they came up with 4,233 school seats. Now, it would be a little bit different if you looked at just the plain base state rated capacity at 28,255.
We're in better shape than I thought.
All right. Councilman Trollinger.
Yes, so thank you for putting these charts together and applying the formula. For residents that are hearing different things, where can they find these, on our website or where else, besides downloading the agenda packet?
These numbers in particular, like I said, the majority of the information that was provided was created by Charles County government. So it is on their agendas. They do have those available. They can certainly reach out to staff at either the county or the town to receive those numbers. I do want to point out one thing that I found interesting, and that's if you look at our draft school allocation eligibility list, FY 2023, that was attached to the agenda. You'll see here that I used the county's formatting as far as how they laid out their list. Now, according to their adequate public facilities ordinance, which we do not have in place yet, if you do not have allocatable capacity at all three levels, so at the elementary, middle school, and high school, you can't allocate any school seats. So if you look at the town, and when we say there's 4,233 school seats, that's the entire county, all schools. So if you look at the town for middle school, all of our projects go to Summers Middle School. There is 0 capacity available.
It's clear as mud. All right. Does
So
that
the
answer
town
your
doesn't have
question?
any control over the construction or anything to do with schools. That's, the county, the Board of Education. But we do play a role in how that goes with allocations.
Thank you.
Any other question? Councilman Jenkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Dave Jenkins, Ward 4. Thank you for the report, well put together, and thanks for inviting the school board folks as well. I had a question. It's on page 256 of the report, the total report, and it says draft county, Charles County School APF 2022 allocation cycle. And it has that there's a deficit at Walter Mitchell. But then if you go down to the page 260 on the draft 2021 cycle, Summers has 175 student.
That must have been the county's report.
Yeah, so
I don't know the answer to that.
I'm not understanding that difference. I mean, is it gotten better or worse, or I don't understand those numbers. Are there 2 different years and therefore it changes every year?
Potentially. I don't know if Ben's on, if he can weigh in on those numbers from that report. Maybe not.
He's joining us. Just a second.
And then I see that
Mr. Yeckley, you'll need to unmute your, there you go.
Hi, good evening, members of the town council. My name is Ben Yeckley, and I'm the
Charles County Adequate Public Facilities Planner, Charles County. So the table that was just referenced, they were 2 different years.
Okay.
The one that was first was for this particular year, which is 2022, and the one that was referenced further down, that was for last year's table, and it was just inputted into the document for informational purposes.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions from council? All right. Any questions for Director Harrington or anyone else?
So we
Hey.
have to make a decision tonight, or are we going to have further discussions or about what number we're going to, I know it's for fiscal year 23, right? So we're technically in fiscal year.
We were supposed to meet in June, and then things got delayed.
Sure.
Just
No
with the timing. So we are looking for a determination tonight. If that determination is we want to stick with 100 for now and then see how things go, we can certainly do that. Per the town code, we can go back in January, and if there are additional school seats available, we can allocate additional.
And what was your recommendation?
I did not have a recommendation.
What is your recommendation?
I don't particularly have one, to be honest. Based on the town code, it is, yeah, I think that at this point you could stick with the 100 minimum, and go from there, depending on how projects proceed forward, and we can reevaluate in January. But I hesitate to put in my own personal opinion, as I am the one that's dealing with the applications and moving things forward.
Well, you see what we don't see, and I appreciate your expertise on this. Would we have to wait till January if we see that we're maybe coming against a lot more requests for school seats? Could we reevaluate before January, or is January hard and fast?
It just states in the town code, it states that you can reevaluate in January. So it's a little vague.
Okay. Council, she's looking for you're looking for a consensus?
Looking for a consensus.
That to stay with a minimum of 100 or to increase it. So if I have a recommendation from any of the council members?
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Councilwoman Bryant Ward, I feel that you came up with the 253 point, what was it, 0.94?
98, yes.
Nine.
That was the calculation in the town code.
So I feel that you came up with that calculation methodically, and to go back and go to 100 obviously would not serve the purpose. So my recommendation is that we move forward with the 253.98 school seat allocations that you've calculated.
Any discussion from other council members?
Well, I guess the question becomes, what is the school board looking at allocation for us at this point in time? The county with the school board. I kind of think that the building might slow down a little bit. The way the market's hitting right now, there's a big drop taking place. And I think we could live with 100, but if our code and ordinance says we should be able to get 257, but then again, has that ever been agreed to by the school board and by the county?
We have them available if you'd like to talk to them directly.
How did that get into the in writing? Who put it there?
Mr. Heim, would you like to come on down? Isn't this always great? Not expecting to speak, but I'm glad you're here.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Heim. I'm the Chief of Operations and Supporting Services for Charles County Public Schools. If you're asking for the school system opinion, if we could stick with the 100, and if there could be something that could be re-evaluated, it was mentioned a couple minutes ago in January. Ms. Harrington and I have talked with the county. We do a joint meeting with them every year. We share our enrollment numbers with them after we get them verified from the state, our September 30th enrollment numbers. And then we sit down with them. They share data with us ahead of time. We review the data. And then there's a joint meeting between the Board of Commissioners, the county commissioners, and the school board and our elected school board officials. And we sit down and discuss those numbers. So if there were that opportunity, and Ms. Harrington, after we had a conversation following the hub annexation hearing a couple months ago. We talked about establishing a meeting between the town council and the mayor and our school system and the board. So that is something we would be open to. We've talked about throwing out the idea of getting together in August or September. So that would allow us to work together as a board. And then if this would have an opportunity for you then to vote again in January on finalizing those numbers, we'd welcome that opportunity.
I think it's so important to collaborate. We are our own independent government, as you know, the town of La Plata, but our residents go to the Charles County Public Schools. So it is very important that we are all on the same page. As long as, and I know Director Harrington has spent way too many hours on this, and it is greatly, greatly appreciated. As long as the lines of communication are open and they're not going, our residents are not going to suffer because of a commitment that we have said that we'll do, we're still doing a minimum of 100. We're not saying it's 100, it's a minimum. So I am comfortable with that since you all are talking and you are including the Charles County government with that. I think that's the best that we can do, but I do respect Director Harrington identifying that we could ask for 253.98 based on the formula with that. Right now, the projects that are coming, the developments that are coming forth, they're not going to be this year. They're not going to impact the schools this year. Maybe a little bit, but not. You've got one that is looking at coming in. They won't even put a shovel into the ground for the next 5 years. The hub, the next 5 years, minimum. So we're looking down the road. So immediately, the impact is what we're looking at. So I have heard Councilwoman Bryant Ward saying that we should go with the 253.98. And I am under the impression that as long as we're not taking away from our residents and they're impacted on there, if we could deal with a minimum of 100 and then reassess as needed, I am fine with that. Go ahead, Councilwoman Bryant Ward.
This calculation was calculated for FY '23. So you're not taking into consideration something that's going to happen 5 years down the line. You're taking into consideration what's going to happen for FY '23.
So the allocation eligibility list is what we have right now in the process. So Rosewick Corner, they were approved last year for 193 units. We already issued some of their allocations. They have 29.7 remaining. Of course, you see Stagecoach on here. They did receive the preliminary plat approval for 636 units. They will be breaking that up into phases. So while I have on here that they need 295.7 allocations, that's not in one piece. It will be broken up amongst several phases.
And will they be asking for any in FY '23?
I do not know. I have not heard.
Okay.
So that's the other tricky part about the position that I find myself in, is that I do know that I have Rosewick Corner that's approved. They're looking for the remainder of theirs. We have Agricopia Section 7A, the towns, or Mallard's Pond Townhomes at Potomac Square. That was the annexation. And then those two are looking to get their final plat approval in September. So we will need those school seat allocations. And then Steeplechase Phase 3, as you know, is trying to get their master site development plan amended. But we do have them on the record, which is why they're on the list. But other than that, this is what I have in that has some kind of submission in. We are aware of it and it is moving forward. So remaining allocations for all of those is 439. Obviously, Stagecoach and several others are not going to be developed during FY '23. So we don't need all 439. But that's where I had the numbers from. Like I said, if you read our town code, it specifically states that the town council may use the county's population versus the town's population to come up with the number of school seat allocations. I took the number of school seat allocations from the Charles County's the planning and growth management when they did their report. That's how many they said that there were available overall. So that's how I came up with the number.
You have a follow-up? Go ahead, Councilman Jenkins.
Thank you, Councilman Jenkins, Ward 4. I would feel more comfortable remaining with the 100 for the time being and then reevaluate for the code in January. And I would echo the mayor's comments for the need And I'm glad that school board staff is here for communication and open dialogue, because at the end of the day, we're all part of the same process. We just happen to have a political boundary between us, but for kids or folks who are going to school, they do not necessarily understand it, and that's not their fault. I would support the 100, but also thank the staff, Board of Ed staff, for being here, and I would urge continued cooperation and communication. Thank you.
Director Harrington, we have 5 months till January. Will we issue, I know it's a goal, it's the crystal ball here. Do you think that we will issue more than our minimum 100 based on what has been coming to your office?
I can calculate here real quick. Based on what I know that I have in my queue right now, we would need 52.7 school seat allocations for those projects that I have in my immediate queue for final plat approval. As our code states, we cannot issue final plat approval or building permits unless there is a school seat allocated. So Rosewick Corner, Agricopia, Section 7A, and the Mallards Pond Townhomes of Potomac Square, those are looking for their final plat approval, or Rosewick Corner is already approved. They're looking for their remainder of school seats, and the other two are looking for their final plat approval in September. So we would need 52.7 right now to proceed forward with what we have.
Okay, and then coming down the pike, do you see any before January?
Potentially with, it depends, with Stagecoach, and then how things proceed with Steeplechase Phase 3. Again, those are unknowns. I don't know.
Okay. Yes, Councilman Goldsman.
I'm curious about this extrapolation as far as the 257. Is that strictly internal that you were looking at comparing the county numbers to the town numbers, or is that in writing or code anyplace?
Talking about the percentage?
Yes.
That is in town code. It is listed at that first paragraph in my staff report is pretty much quoted directly from the town code. So it states that that we'll look at the population of the county compared to the town. And I looked at the 2020 census numbers, which is where I got the 166,617 and the 10,159. And then after, some correct math, you get 6%. So I took the 4,233. Now I don't know if the Board of Education has a different number of school seats available, but I used the number that was provided by the county, which they said was 4,233. You take 6% of that, because our code doesn't stipulate just the schools that are within the town. It says countywide. So you take the 4,233 multiplied by 6, you get 253.98.
Councilman Challenger.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Heim, for being available tonight. We really appreciate it. I know we've seen you here advocating on behalf of the county. If the town did not allocate enough, right? So we went with the minimum 100, and surprisingly or not, we needed more. What then happens? What's the consequence of that for residents?
So I would assume if you didn't allocate enough for one particular year, then you could add those on for the following year. It's part of your seat allocation policy, since you are distinct from the county's APF policy.
Right, but in the meantime, before that next change, right, before that next year comes up, what happens?
Sure. So if you would delay taking a vote tonight, and if you consider the opportunity to take the vote in January, we would have new enrollment numbers for September 30th. So we'd have updated. I would not be using year-old numbers from last year, for consideration.
Can I piggyback on that? So I think what Councilman Challenger is getting at,
Sure.
or if he isn't, this is what I'm getting at. So we say a minimum of 100, and we need 200, but we have committed to 100. that deficit right there, does that mean that the La Plata residents that are moving in will not get their permit issued for occupancy in their home because we have opted to go low on the school seat allocations and therefore we have not saved them a slot?
I can't speak for as far as permits being issued. I can speak as far as, from the county, because that's most of where our experience are. So they'll sometimes allocate more seats in any given year than are actually used, for which a UNO is eventually turned over. And in some cases, with certain types of developments, they do have a grant. They are grandfathered under certain county policies. If you look at the APF, where they do have a carryover.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was getting at too, because, and I think this is what correct me if I'm wrong, Councilwoman Bryant Ward, but the formula seems to exist for a reason, right? So if it's based on population, maybe the formula needs to be tweaked in the future so that there's less of a question mark. I mean, we don't really even have a range as to what's expected. We're just kind of eyeballing it here. And the only thing I'm concerned about is, right, so we undershoot it, right? And then residents or their kids all of a sudden are looking around saying, where am I going to end up? What's going to happen? Whereas we could have just said 150 arbitrarily, right? And we don't want to take anything away from the county, but we certainly have our obligation to our future town residents. That's all I was kind of getting at there. Maybe I'm off the mark as to having that concern if there's so much available unused that could be shifted.
So, and just, and I welcome the opportunity to talk about that a little bit. So when we talk about, the 4,000 and some school seat openings, I appreciate Ms. Harrington saying that that's at 110% rated capacity. So that was a change that was made several years ago to the county policy. So for example, if a school has, school X has a 100,000 seat capacity, what the county then considers is 110% of that. So they actually add 100 students beyond that 1,000. So if you magnify that over the 39 schools we have, 22 elementary schools, 8 middle schools, and 7 high schools, that number becomes large. One of the other things, if you really drill down into the information, and then naturally so, in the developed areas, that's where you don't see capacity, because obviously that's where the growth is. So some things we've done as a county, we try to spread that out as much as we can. So for example, when we opened Billingsley Elementary School in 2019, we looked at all 21 elementary school zones at that time. So we just didn't consider the schools we're going to feed, surrounding schools we're going to feed into Billingsley to take students from them. All 21 zones were looked at, elementary zones at that time, and ultimately 16 of the 21 existing elementary zones, and Billingsley became the 22nd school, but 16 of those 21 zones changed to try to spread students amongst all the elementary schools. And the same thing happened with the middle school redistricting that we just completed. We did a middle school redistricting over the last 2 years because of the 200 and some seats that we added at Benjamin Stoddard Middle School in Waldorf. But we just didn't look at Summers or Hanson schools that could potentially feed into Stoddard to add that additional capacity. We looked at all 8 middle schools. So this upcoming school year, all 8 middle school zones are going to see changes with their zone and hopefully to try to balance out some of that enrollment. But even with doing so, there are limitations with that. We don't want to have kids on a bus for an hour. So if you got Mattawam and Summers that are particularly overcrowded, and those are 2 of our most overcrowded middle schools currently, you can't just send some of those kids to Smallwood, which is 25 miles away. So we do try to balance that enrollment amongst our other schools when we have redistricting opportunities. And we can also do moratoriums. We've done moratoriums in the past with some schools that were overcrowded, North Point at a time, Davis at a time, and Summers here in the town of La Plata. They had a moratorium in place because of the fact that they were over state rated capacity, in particular with the Glen Eagles, where kids were shifted to after 2016 who got a UNO to Stoddard to try to balance it out. So we do look at internally what we can do to try to balance that. But unfortunately, in some of the outlying schools, there is a capacity there, but that's not where the growth is. We do try to send kids there with a reasonable amount of time on buses for transportation purposes.
So Mr. Heim, if I heard you correctly, if we just say we're going to go with 253.98, because that's the number that was thrown out, and you realize that there is an overcrowdedness in Summers, Mitchell, Matula, La Plata High School that are within the incorporated town limits. And then even some of our residents go out to McDonough. Then the school board can issue a moratorium on admitting children into these schools. Therefore, if I'm incorrect, please correct me. Therefore, even though we have the seats, we may not be able to use them because you would issue a moratorium, which is your authority on that, and it would directly impact our residents.
But we would only issue a moratorium if a school was over its state rated capacity, and we're not talking, 5% over their state rated capacity. Consider with Milton Summers, when we did that, they were using 18 relocatable classrooms outside of that school. So there, at times, they were over 1,000 students with their enrollment for a school that has a state rated capacity in the 700s. So we only issue moratoriums when we are well over capacity. We've exceeded the building itself and adding relocatables on that site.
I never want to be greedy, but I don't ever want to hurt our residents either. And that's why I'm going to go back to you, Director Harrington. You're the expert here. And I would love to have your input on what you think council should, from now until, if it's January and we reassess, that's fine. If you do for all of FY23, that's fine too. Tonight, what consensus would have you sleep at night?
Thank you for putting me in a very uncomfortable position. Again, as I've pointed out in the past, if we have a minimum of 100 school seats at this point in time, we can cover the 3 projects that we have immediately becoming for approval. For Stagecoach and for Steeplechase, which are the next 2 that I have in my list. Logically, we're looking for, it's gonna take a while to do the final plat for Stagecoach. After we've looked at engineering, and Steeplechase still has to get their amended master site development plan reviewed and potentially approved, and then do their preliminary plat for phase 3. So I think that if we allocate the minimum of 100 tonight, we can set up a joint meeting in August, September timeframe, and make sure that we're having these conversations, because I was kind of using numbers after the fact. I did listen in to the June 7th meeting, so I was able to hear kind of the discussion. But I think it's very important to make sure that we have those discussions between the town, because I want to make sure that we know what your numbers are, what the county's numbers are, and how we should proceed forward. So I would say a minimum of 100 with the option of coming back in January to allocate additional school seats up to the percentage. Like I said, this is what we would have, 253.98. At this point in time, based on the allocations that are available. But if that changes in September, then we can readdress that in January.
All right, council, I'm looking for consensus, or are you still with the 253? So I've got Councilman Bryant Ward who's suggesting the 253 for this evening to move forward. Councilman Goldsmith?
Okay. May I ask one more question?
Absolutely.
This 253 type figure, has that ever been validated or even presented to the school board? No. So it's new to you tonight then?
Like I said, they had their meeting on June 7th.
Uh-huh.
And I took the information that was provided at that meeting. So I don't know how to tell you what a mad woman I was trying to figure out how to present this data. And I just so happened to catch the population percentage in our code, which made that a lot easier to kind of establish what we could allocate based on what our town code says. So again, I don't know if the Board of Education agrees with the 4,233 number, or if that, if there's any differential between what the county presented and what you have. But that was how I derived that number. The town's population compared to the county we're 6% of the county. So we take the number of available school seat allocations that were presented You take 6% of that, you get 253.98.
I guess I'm willing to go with the 100 right now, but I'm, again, to the school board, I'd like for y'all to think about that and give us, is that a logical calculation to use? And if so, is it too much? What would you suggest? We've been 100 seats for 15 years, 20 years. There was no rhyme or reason to it. It was just, we'll take 100. Now we're building and we need more than 100. We shouldn't be limiting ourselves just because 20 years ago, somebody said 100 is a good figure. We need true figures and allocations and percentage wise for the future. But right now, I guess I'm willing to take the 100.
Councilman Challenger?
I would agree with Councilman Goldsmith. I think everybody recognizes that tonight, okay? But I'm not comfortable straying from the town code on the formula if that's what the code says. So I'm with Councilwoman Bryant Ward on the 6%.
So did I heard you agree with two people, which is very
I
politically
agree with
correct.
I think we can differentiate that. I agree with the need to have a solid formula and basis. If the 6% isn't correct, we need to amend that and address that with the county and make sure that we have something that works, that's sustainable. But I do not agree with the 100 seats.
So
I agree
tonight,
with
what are you
6%.
asking for?
But I'm not asking for
Well,
any of
what's your consensus? 253 or a minimum of
it.
100?
I think I was clear 253 for the 6%.
Okay.
Apologize if I wasn't.
Councilman Jenkins?
I would support what Director Harrington eloquently stated about a minimum of 100 for the time being. Then have a meeting with the Board of Ed staff in August or September. We get some better numbers. Then we can recalculate and then come back if we need to in January and amend it. And then as a caveat, not that we have anything else to do, it certainly suggests to me that our allocation policy in the code needs to be revised dramatically to reflect as best we can current conditions.
So I will add that the 100 minimum came from when we were building the town's wastewater treatment plant. Former Mayor Ekman did some very fancy calculations and determined that in order to fund the debt service for the wastewater treatment plant, we would need a minimum of 100 school seats a year of development to cover that cost. Obviously, we have different means and it's a different time. I have no idea where the population percentage came from. I just know that that's what's in our code. But there's several places within the code that you can look that says that you have a minimum of 100, but you can calculate it here, but then you can come back in January and see if there's more. So we definitely need to look at our code. I've had conversations with the town manager as we look at our adequate public facilities ordinance that's currently in draft process, that we should probably move our school seat allocations to the adequate public facilities ordinance, which would be in the zoning code rather than having it in the subdivision code. So we will have the opportunity to discuss our school seat allocation policy. And if there's something that makes better sense in today's world and how things are developing. I have no idea who came up with those numbers. I just found it and plugged it in and that's what I got.
So here's my, my take on this. The word minimum, it's not maximum. So if we do a minimum of 100, means that we could go up to 253.98. It's a minimum. It's the base. Am I wrong on that?
No, that's the way the code is written.
Okay, so if we say a minimum of 100 and we need 150, we have a minimum of 100. So are we not going to be able to get school seats?
I think it's, I don't, help me out here. I'm drowning. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. It's a little convoluted. I think that if that's your intention, if you want to have a minimum of 100 with the opportunity to go up to 253, you should probably state that tonight so it's very clear. So that way, when I am coming before the Planning Commission, I can state that we have a minimum of 100 up to no more than 253, and this falls within that allocation.
Councilman,
So, thank you, Madam Mayor. So We're talking about the allocations that you have for the master site development plans that have been approved. But what about the county? The county is building. So how does the county's building and population factor into our remaining school seats? So if we take 100 and the county is building all of these homes off of St. Charles Parkway, what does that do for the population and our available school seats if we want to come back in January to ask for more?
I'm not sure if Mr. Yeckley's still on there, so I don't want to misspeak and speak for the county government,
Please
but I mean, you are two distinct elected boards. So the county has a policy, and it's my understanding both the town and La Plata and the town of Indian Head have their own distinct policy. So there is no, to my knowledge, no interaction between the two boards as far as the county government and the town. So
That's not my question.
Okay.
My question was not if we're interacting. I know that we're separate entities. My question is the building that they're doing, the construction and the homes that they're getting, the population that they're having, will that population impact our ability to come back in January and request additional seats if they take the seats up? If we only request 100 and they get more, how does that work?
So the county has approved their school seat allocations for this upcoming year, and that was done already between the joint meeting between our Board of Education and the county commissioner. So their next approval process will not come up until next spring with that. So as far as what you do now would be based upon what the county has already done, but it's again, I don't want to misspeak here, but my understanding is that the town has the authority to, you know, which you can issue your own school seats independent of what the county does.
Right, I understand
So
that.
as far as our reaction to the school system, you know, the kids show up in our building and we teach them. And, you know, down the road, as I mentioned, when we get over the capacity, then we have to take measures of adding relocatable classrooms. We do redistricting, we do school construction. But I can't speak as far as, you know, the schools, I'm sorry, the county's allocations. We just react to when those kids show up. I'm sorry that doesn't answer your question, but
That's it, but thank
but I
you.
can't.
I think you're
So-
missing. It doesn't.
I would like to put a cap that we do no more than 253.98 and we do a minimum of 100. I would like to cap that off for FY '23. So it addresses Councilwoman Bryant Ward's concerns and Councilman Goldsmith's. So it's a minimum of 100, a max of 253.98. We can even round it down to 253, that 0.98. We'll sacrifice that one. All right, consensus. Do we now agree a minimum 100, no more than 253?
Why would I argue with you?
Thank you very much.
On her
Councilman
birthday, right?
Jones.
I support that.
All right, Councilwoman Bryant Ward?
Why wasn't it presented?
Well, you know what? They just wanted to, you're not gonna go with that option? It is, but it's just said a little differently. Gets everyone involved. Just yes or no? All right, Councilman Jenkins?
Well, it's yes, but my caveat would be, I don't particularly like the upper limit. And then just for future reference, it troubles me, and it's not anybody's fault here, but it troubles me that we have an ordinance and we have no idea where the numbers came from.
Well, that is
And-
something working.
And we seem to also want to be able to take, this is my observation would be, we need to also take in that school seats and housing is tied to water capacity and sewer capacity and the physical ability for us to pay for it and operate those facilities. So just to say, well, we need X amount of houses so we can pay for schools.
We don't pay.
I know that.
Yeah.
I'm just making a point.
Mhm.
So that troubles me that we have this conversation that we need all these rooftops to pay for stuff.
That
It
was
never
back in
pays
June.
for itself.
It was back in 2005.
Right. I get, and that's my point. So all I'm saying, we need to think in today's terms and not 15 years ago.
Mhm.
Thank you.
When I tell you that I struggled with writing the staff report tonight. Because I knew what we had in our project queue. I know what we have, in the kind of development outreach that we're looking at, but also wanting to make sure that I could get communication through the county and the Board of Education. I really struggled. So that I didn't take this lightly. And I do think that even if we set the 253 as a maximum tonight, which is what the code would say, we can always go back in January and reevaluate based on the numbers that are provided. And if something changes, then we can look at it from that angle.
You have an open dialogue with the county and with the school board, and I trust that you are going to do what is best for the residents of the town of La Plata as well as the students there. So that's why we now have that leeway, and the consensus is no more than 253.98. All right.
Everyone good with that?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to the next is Smecco streetlight repair request.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Town Council, I think you see in the agenda, I've included a staff report as well, supporting documentation from Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative. They are transitioning to an LED light system. In doing so, we're going to have some considerations to make as far as the lamp heads. So this request is to send it to the refer to the DRB for a formal review and recommendation back to the Town Council on the sort of, I don't want to call it Uber, but the preferred design for our downtown area. Excuse me. So it's the will of council.
The will of council to have the DRB.
Yeah.
I would go with, I like the old fashioned looking ones and not the lamps that look a little bit different there. But I am fine with the DRB looking at that because they will do what's best for the town. I would think. Council, any comments?
I'm okay with going to the DRB. I just have a quick question about it. So would these new posts, would the wiring be underground? Because I see in the memo from Smecco dated June the 8th is there's some reference to being underground. Is that done now or would that be done in the future?
I think it would be
Or
consistent.
we don't know yet.
I think it would be consistent with the current setup. So I don't think
Okay.
they plan on sort of changing out the poles or the post as much as if it's currently underground, it will be continue to be served underground. As you see, if the map, it's more of our downtown core that we're talking about. It's not into the neighborhoods, the more the more residential neighborhoods. It's more towards our downtown core.
Thank you.
And I am aware that Smecco is trying to find any and all inventory that matches our downtown right now to put it aside should we have mishap on one of them. And it's when they run out of inventory that this would be enacted. So will of the council, we're good with DRB?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Brings us to legislation, Resolution 22-03 Hawthorne Yards annexation. And before we do that, Mr. Manuel, I just want to publicly state that I did say at the county meeting that we held last week that I would keep the record open for 30 days. Our attorney has clarified that under state law, we cannot do that because the meeting was postponed and it came up postponed 28 days. So actually it would have been, or 27 days. The only way that we could have held it open would have been 3 more days. And even that is, the code does not support, it's as stated again, a public hearing may be rescheduled from the original hearing for no more than 30 days. So I am a person of my word, but when my attorney tells me I can't do that, I have to walk it back a little bit. So that was my, I was not informed on that. And that is the reason why we had to close the public hearing today. And that brings us to Resolution 22-03 Hawthorne Yards annexation. Mr. Manuel.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Town Council, a resolution concerning Hawthorne Yards annexation for the purpose of authorizing the annexation of 53.2274 acres, more or less, of land into the corporate limits of the town of La Plata by amending the corporate limits of the town, establishing certain terms, conditions, and circumstances applicable to such land and to the owners thereof, providing for zoning of such land upon annexation and all matters relating to the annexation of such 53.2274 acres of land, more or less, into the town of La Plata.
In light of the testimonies heard tonight on the annexation of this property, I move to table Resolution 22-03 until we can really absorb everything that the residents have said this evening and their written testimony. And I would like to hold it off until August 16th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion from council? All in favor of tabling Resolution 22-03 this evening, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay? Okay.
Nay.
All right. Motion carries 3-2. Brings us to Resolution 22-04, Hawthorne Yards Annexation Plan.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Town Council, the resolution concerning Hawthorne Yards annexation plan for the purpose of approving an annexation plan for the annexation of 53.2274 acres, more or less, of land into the corporate limits of the town of La Plata and all matters relating to a plan for annexation of such 53.2274 acres of land, more or less, into the town of La Plata.
Again, I make a motion to table Resolution 22-04 so that we can absorb everything that was said this evening and rehear it on this, reintroduce it on the 16th of August. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. That brings us to ordinance 22-11, stormwater management illicit discharge ordinance.
One sentence. Yes, Madam Mayor, Town Council, an ordinance concerning stormwater management illicit discharge ordinance for the purpose of amending Chapter 167 Stormwater Management to accommodate the illicit discharge ordinance requirement by the state of Maryland.
Do I have a motion to accept ordinance 22-11 as presented?
Madam Mayor, if I could, this is for introduction
And
tonight. I
just
apologize.
introducing. Okay, then it has been introduced. Do I have any discussion on this? Councilman Jenkins?
Maybe Councilman Jenkins, Ward 4, maybe this is premature, but I assume this has gone through legal review.
Yes, it has. And this is the ordinance we discussed at a previous work session that is part of our MS4 permit requirement. And this ordinance, as indicated in the memorandum, meets the intent of the requirements of the state of Maryland.
And again, maybe premature, so are there any fiscal impacts on the town yet in terms of costs or?
The only cost would be in the construction to sort of upgrade our ponds. But as far as this ordinance goes, this would be beneficial because it gives us more authority to sort of bring
enforcement?
Yes, violators into compliance.
Thank you.
A financial incentive to bring them into compliance.
Any other discussion? All right. Initially, we were going to go into closed session. We no longer need to go into closed session this evening. So I move to adjourn this very robust meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Have a great night.